Die Namib-woestyn lewe. Die oudste woestyn ter wêreld, die Namib, is dor, vaal, warm en dood. Totdat die ervare gidse van Bathurst Birding op die Living Desert Tour 'n wonderwêreld vol lewe vir jou oopknoop. Gaan op 'n Living Desert Tour en beleef 'n woestynparadys van lewe. Of gaan op 'n gewilde nightwalk en beleef 'n wonderwêreld van naglewe in die woestyn. Dit is 'n belewenis in Swakopmund wat jy nie moet misloop nie. Hierdie deel van die kuslyn is ook een van die mees gesogte plekke ter wêreld om voëllewe te bestudeer, met een van die grootste kormorantkolonies en vele ander gesogte hoogtepunte. Met groot wild, woestyndiertjies, insekte, voëls en geskiedenis, knoop Bathurst Birding 'n wêreld oop wat jy vinnig sal liefkry. Al drie hierdie unieke toere vertrek direk vanaf Atlantic Villa. Besoek hulle webtuiste en bespreek vandag nog jou plek by Atlantic Villa. atlanticvilla.com.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome back. It's Chris here with Adopt Africa. I hope you don't mind the short advert there. So there we go. Switched over to the proper microphone. So how's that? That's better. Hey, Bradley. Good morning. Welcome. Glad to see you here. Yeah. So that was from the Atlantic Villa. That was Giselle doing an advert for that. Part of my effort here to try to help South African businesses weather the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 crisis. That's for Namibia. Not that anyone will be tromping off to Namibia or Swakopmund anytime soon, but nonetheless, that's just a mild effort on my part here to try to help out some folks that are trying to get by in South Africa. And of course, Giselle, I'm a huge fan of her music. So welcome aboard, everybody. There's a ranger, buddy. And Bradley says it was a stunning picture you used as a backdrop. Are you talking about the one that's currently up right now, Bradley, which would be the Mahalisburg Mountains behind you there? Hey, Drian, welcome aboard. Glad to see folks here this morning. So along with that line, what I'm doing is on my streams, I've offered for folks that I know that do things in South Africa that are trying to make a living in the midst of this, especially given that, not that I'm confining it to minority businesses, but oh, the sunset, Bradley. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, that was a photograph I took, I think in November. It was at sunset. Beautiful. We get some amazing sunrises and sunsets, particularly sunsets in this area. I'm not sure why. I mean, I've lived all over the world and I've seen sunsets all over the planet. But for some reason here in central Pennsylvania, we have absolutely stunning sunsets for a good part of the year. So that was from November. November, December, when I was out exercising, walking and running, a lot of amazing sunsets. I love the pinks and the blues and the purples. It is. Thank you. That's my own photograph. I'm kind of an amateur photographer. And speaking of photography, there you go. Let me do this very quickly here. So as I mentioned, one of the things I'm doing is I'm trying to help promote South African businesses. And those of you who noticed the caricature of me from the Rugby World Cup there, where I'm wearing the Japan scarf. Hey, Ice. Well, I'm sure Cape Town can compete because the mountain that I have here is not nearly as stunning as what's the I can't think of the small one there, and then or Cable Mountain for that matter. Yeah, the mountain backdrops for Cape Town are just amazing. But anyway, yeah, no, not Table Mountain. It's a Signal Hill. That's the one I'm thinking of. Signal Hill. Yeah. So thank you, Bradley. But Signal Hill's the one I'm thinking of. From above, it looks even more impressive. Signal when you're looking down on it. Yeah, so this is from Shink Art. It's based in Bloemfontein, and they do caricatures. They also have a photography studio. They'll do weddings and such, although I don't think there are many of those going on right now. But fantastic. They do a great job. If you go to their website, you can see it there. It's shink.co.za, and you can check out their website and see what they do. They do caricatures. You can commission or order one like I did, and you see there, it's kind of cool. I see that they've also, if you go to the website and check it out, you'll see that I'm in good company because I noticed on their website that they also have Sia Khaleesi they've done a caricature of, and Joe Black, before he shaved his beard off. For those of you who are Joe Black fans like I am, he recently shaved his beard off. Hey, Paulie, afternoon. Yeah, Joe Black recently shaved his beard off. So what you'll see on the Shink website is Joe Black with the beard still, which is how most of us know him. That's kind of his signature look. I guess he shaved his off for COVID-19, and many of us are refusing to shave ours off. So it's interesting the opposite directions. But anyway, so that's Shink, shink.co.za. You can check them out. They have a photography studio. They do caricatures, and also Amazing characters, by the way. I really love the one that they did with Joe Black and Sia Khaleesi. I also like mine, but those are really awesome. But they also do have a publishing house there, and they do children's books and the like. So anyway, this is just part of my effort to try to help South African businesses weather the storm. So that's Shink Art, folks, shink.co.za. No cadres were injured or harmed in the making of that artwork or the presentation of it on this live stream. Anyway, there you go. So let's see, we talked about Giselle, we've talked about Shink, and I'll hopefully be bringing you some more businesses that you may or may not be familiar with in South Africa, just to remind folks to do business at home. Hey, Blues Pixie, poor Signal Hill turning into a grassy hill from repeated fire. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Yep. Well, anyway, so lots of news today, and I'll touch on these. Oh, yeah, here, let me show you this. Those of you who were watching Ronaldo's stream the other day will see that I held this up. So that's kind of what it looks like when you print it out. And you can get it put on canvas or acrylic, whatever you want. But that's the artwork I printed out on my cheap little color inkjet printer here. So that's pretty darn impressive, I think. A heck of a job there. By the way, the backdrop for this image is the Toyota City Stadium in Japan for the Rugby World Cup, and that is the scene of South Africa's victory over the Welwitschies. And I mention that because behind me on the, let's see if I get this right. It's this way. It's this way. Which way is it? It's this way. That's that way. Anyway, there you go. The Welwitschies, that's from 2015 when they played Tonga. And anyway, so yeah, the Welwitschies, that was the game I was at that stadium. I went to a couple games. I went to a Wales game as well, but this was South Africa, the Springboks against the Welwitschies. And of course, it was slaughter. The Welwitschies got beat, but we'd expect that, especially considering that the Springboks are the Rugby World Cup champions. That William Webb Ellis Trophy is sitting in South Africa. There you go. Right, so news. Let's talk a little bit about the news here. Lots of things to talk on the news. I'll run through the list of this, and then we'll talk about some of these in more detail as we go along. So welcome, everyone who's here with me this morning. I thought I'd try a morning stream, see how this goes. I've done one or two of these in the past. When I didn't have many subscribers, it was a really small audience. Not that we have a major audience now, but I figure with the COVID-19 lockdown taking place here in the U.S. and in South Africa, that at this hour of the day, early morning here in the U.S., some folks, even if they are working, would just be getting ready to go to work or sitting down at their desk and not really into their work yet. And it's mid-afternoon in the middle of Africa, so in Southern Africa. So, and if you got the lockdown going on, not a lot of folks out actually working. So what else are you going to do? So I figured it'd be a good sweet spot to try this and see how we do. Anyway, so in Zambia, a Chinese restaurant was closed, apparently. The Lusaka Times reported that the Chinese restaurant was closed because they refused to provide service to a local Zambian national who was called a foreigner by the Chinese proprietors of the Chinese restaurant, apparently. Yeah, that's from the Lusaka Times. So xenophobia working in the opposite direction. Are the Chinese the migrants or the Zambians the migrants? I mean, if you speak Chichewa, are you a migrant? No. Anyway, so that happened in Zambia, apparently. In Botswana, another dozen elephants have turned up dead in the villages up in the northwest part of the country, not too far from the Okavango Delta, which I previously mentioned. There were 56 elephants killed on March 18th, or excuse me, there were 44 elephants killed on March 18th, and now another 12 are dead under mysterious circumstances. The Department of Parks and Wildlife had warned people not to eat the elephant carcasses because they believed them to be poisoned. So strange situation now. It's 56 elephants in Botswana in just over a month. Chris White, is your Yahoo address from LinkedIn active? It is. The Gmail is fine, Bradley. Just stick with the Gmail. It's fine. I use the other address for a lot of different things, but when it deals with this channel, I'm using the Gmail address. So please use that. Yeah. So 56 elephants in a short period of time in Botswana. That's not a good sign. It's troubling. Now, what the news reports don't indicate is if the elephants had their tusks removed or not. And then we would know it's clearly a poacher situation, or if it's simply a situation of the elephants are irritating villagers and they've killed them, which has happened in the past. Elephants are a nuisance for many people in Botswana. Not for me. I love elephants, but there are so many in Botswana that they become quite a challenge. Now, for those who were watching that video footage all over social media a couple of days ago, I saw Ramon commented on this. I've talked about it. We now see a report coming out from DefenseWeb, and DefenseWeb is a website or a media publishing place in South Africa that that covers news. Excuse me, that covers news. There we go. All right. On military and security subjects across Africa. Now, I consider this to be a reliable source in part because I am a published author on this website, so I can speak for the veracity of my credentials. And it's a very reputable site. So, Defense Web, this is my article. This is not about the issue I'm talking about. I just thought I'd throw that up there. That's one I wrote about Botswana's plan to acquire Gripens, the same aircraft that the South Africans acquired about 20 years ago. See how far behind Botswana is? But anyway, so for those who are watching the footage of the armored vehicles being offloaded and the claims that they were Chinese and then others saying that these were being shipped through Namibia for Botswana, well, Defense Web says, in fact, they were vehicles from the Swiss company Moag, as we talked about, that were being shipped to Botswana. The problem is the footage is from 2016, according to Defense Web. As I said, Defense Web, in my view, is a reputable source. And it's a great source for defense and security information for Africa, but not just Africa, but particularly Southern Africa. It's actually probably about the best you're going to find, one of the best. So check it out. This is an article, as I said, I did a couple years ago, from 2017, I think I wrote this. So about 2.5 years ago. Anyway, yeah, so those vehicles were in fact military hardware destined for Botswana, for the Botswana Defense Force, but it's from 2016. You see the danger with social media, folks? People can throw anything up there. That's why you have to be careful about your sourcing. You have to be careful about how you comment on things, because unless you're present, it can be a challenge. When Zimbabwe had its coup a couple of years ago, what happened was I wrote an article on LinkedIn within 15 hours of the coup starting. And what happened was that a number of people were circulating videos on social media, on Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, all over the place. And they were purportedly showing the military moving out of the barracks and surrounding the cities and things like that. The problem is that most of that footage was actually the Zimbabwe Defense Force on training exercises, and some of it was 3, 5, 8, 10 years previously. Now, there was actual footage when the military moved around Harare, and a few people put that out. So I didn't rely on that footage when I did my article. I relied on sources inside Zimbabwe, as well as my knowledge and understanding of the situation in Zimbabwe and my predictions of what I said was going to happen there. And then within 15 hours of the coup starting in Zimbabwe, I actually wrote an article and published it and said, this is a coup. This is why it's happening. This is what's going to happen. And it's a coup. For those who remember, when that happened, people were reticent to call it a coup. Very few people were willing to do that. Most security analysts, most diplomats were unwilling to call that a coup. I did. Anyway, I'm not boasting. I'm just stating a fact. It's on my LinkedIn account. The article's still there. You can check it out. It was 15 hours after the coup started. But my point with that story is not to boast, but more to talk about the fact that was a difficult thing to write, because it wasn't like I was a journalist sitting on the ground in Zimbabwe. Very difficult thing to do. So I took a real risk by making my assessment, analysis, predictions. But I was comfortable with it based on my knowledge and based on the information I'd gotten from some folks who were in Zimbabwe, and also a few folks next door in neighboring Botswana who had family in Harare and were sharing information. So there you go. Anyway, so that's what those tanks were all about. They were destined for Botswana that went through Walvis Bay or Walfish Bay. They weren't tanks. They're armored personnel carriers, as indicated. And then please, folks, don't call them tanks. They're not tanks. That's a very specific type of vehicle with a very different capability than an armored personnel carrier. Starbucks time. Anyway, so back to my point. So yeah, so that was that's what happened in Namibia 4 years ago. It isn't happening today. Yeah. So meanwhile, in Malawi, President Peter Mutharika apparently is in self-imposed isolation over fears with COVID-19. He's not out on the campaign trail. For those paying attention or keeping up with events in the warm heart of Africa, Malawi, known as the warm heart of Africa, the country is undergoing another election because last year's results were nullified by the Constitutional Court, which threw out the results and said they weren't valid for a number of reasons. Didn't have a single candidate that got over 50%, with Mutharika getting 38.5%, his closest follower getting 35%, and the third place follower getting 20%. So the court threw it out and ordered this February a second election, which will take place on July 2nd, although there's rumor it may be moved up sooner. That would be an odd thing to do in the midst of coronavirus. But nonetheless, Mutharika is the sitting president until the election is held. And that is going to take place on July 2nd. Apparently, Mutharika is not out on the campaign trail now. He's isolated in his mansion in Blantyre, the commercial capital of Malawi, which is located in the center, the southern part of Malawi, the southern third. But Mutharika is not on the trail. His opponents are out on the trail, and his running mate, the son of a former president of Malawi, is also on the running trail. Hey, Jacques, welcome aboard. Good to see you here. So Kenya, received news that we'll get a $1 billion loan from the World Bank. Now, this comes on top of an $873 million loan that the IMF gave to them recently for COVID-19. Now, in announcing the loan, Kenya officials said that this is a sign that the World Bank only gives money to sound economies and countries that have their act together. Those are my words. I'm paraphrasing. I can read it from the article, but that's my paraphrasing. But the reality here, ladies and gentlemen, is not necessarily Kenya's finances are in good shape, but this is part of the COVID-19 relief that is taking place on the part of the IMF and World Bank and other multilateral institutions to help countries deal with the COVID-19 crisis. It's not an endorsement for their macroeconomic policies, so we should make that distinction. I appreciate the government officials putting on a brave face, talking about how their economy is in great shape as a consequence of the IMF and World Bank lending to them. That is not the case here. It is simply a case of a country that desperately needs funds and folks helping them out. So so there you have it. Interesting to say the least. Now, I have another picture that I want to show here, but it does not seem to be here. So let me load it up very quickly. And this is also on Kenya. This is a very disturbing thing about Kenya. So let me put this one up for you guys, and we're going to talk about this for a couple of minutes. It's very sad. So if you think things are just bad in South Africa when it comes to oh, that's too big. Sorry about that. I didn't have that adjusted. So let me get this down. This is taking place in Kenya. So I've reported on several times the Red Ants and the Johannesburg Metropolitan Police violating the Justice Minister, Rodney Lamola's decree that no one can be evicted from informal settlements during the lockdown. And this is, sorry about this, taking me a little while to get that up. There we go. Right. So there you go. This is in Kenya. Over the last month, this is what's happening. So in the last month, Kenyan authorities have evicted over 7,000 squatters and destroyed their informal settlements in Nairobi in a very distressing situation here. There you have it. That's the remains of someone's home in Nairobi. In the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19, authorities there are also prohibited from evicting squatters from land. This is public land, just like outside Johannesburg recently, where the Johannesburg Metro and the Red Ants went out and abused people and destroyed their informal settlements. This is also taking place elsewhere around the continent. Here we see it in Nairobi, and what I consider to be a very distressing situation. So I'm going to play a video. Hopefully folks will hang around. This is a pretty good one. So let me do this for you guys, and we'll see how this goes. But this is from the Voice of America. I'm just going to let it play. It's about 2.5 minutes, so please don't run off. It's worth listening and watching this. Here we go.
42-year-old kiosk owner Daniel Ndungu and his 3 children picked through what is left of their home of more than 10 years in Nairobi's Ruai neighborhood. Defying a court order, authorities on Friday forcibly evicted Ndungu's family and more than 7,000 slum dwellers, making them homeless in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic.
I will stay here in the cold and wait. Now there's nowhere to go. Even if I want to move to a new place, there is no place to move and I have no money. Moving to a new place, people won't accept you because they will say you have coronavirus.
Others who could moved into the crowded dwellings of friends and relatives. The evictions, which started in April, left more than 5,000 people homeless earlier this month in Nairobi's Kariobangi neighborhood. The state-run Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company claims ownership of the land and says the families have been occupying it illegally since 2008.
And people know this. People are told this in advance. You are actually sitting on public land. There's a project that is terminating here. We may be able to, probably open up and pump sewage in this direction. People know this, but then either people don't move or they just continue staying there.
37-year-old Bucha Hussein Wako says he has government receipts showing he owns the land he was forced off. But public land is too often sold illegally in Kenya, leaving those who were cheated out of their money, like Wako, also homeless.
They demolished our home and poor people's homes. I slept in the cold for 2 days, and there is a coronavirus pandemic. They told us to go back home when we demonstrated against the demolition. They disrupted it and tear-gassed us.
A small riot erupted earlier this month as evictors clashed with the police in Kariobangi and set fire to cars and tires. A Kenyan High Court had earlier ordered a halt to further demolitions until a petition by residents is heard in June. But for the thousands of Kenyans already left homeless and those still being evicted regardless, there is little hope they will see justice. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, there you go, folks. That's the situation in Nairobi, where in the last month, officials have evicted 7,000 squatters from informal settlements around Nairobi. I think, who said this? Somebody said, oh yes, Paulie said desperately sad. Not only is it sad, folks, I think it's absolutely disgusting, despicable, and shameful conduct on the part of officials. Listen, I am a firm believer in land tenure and property rights and respect for property rights. It is one of the things I served 36 years in uniform to protect for people in this country and around the world. Absolutely. So I am not a fan of squatters, but I understand the situation. Now take a look at that video. You notice the structures that were made out of concrete and rebar? They weren't erected overnight. This isn't something that just cropped up that officials needed to deal with. Clearly, the people squatting on this public land have been there for a very long time. Why in the world is the government destroying these structures? It's absolutely ridiculous. And where are these people supposed to go? Much like in Johannesburg, where the Metro Police and the Metro now controlled by the African National Congress, I should point out, after the betrayal of Herman Mashaba leaving the DA and allowing the ANC with its plurality to form its own coalition and take the mayoralship of Johannesburg. Now that the ANC is in control of the Johannesburg Metro, this is what they do. They evict Africans off of public land in the midst of a pandemic in which people are not allowed to move about. Authorities in Nairobi are doing the exact same thing. You cannot move into or out of Nairobi. That lockdown has just been extended by the government and by President Kenyatta for an additional 21 days running into June. And these officials over the past month have been doing this. Where are these people supposed to go? By the way, check out that social distancing there in Nairobi. Yeah, I don't know if that's old footage or if that was recent footage. The report on Voice of America would give you the impression it was certainly recent footage. But whatever the case is, not exactly social distancing there, folks. That's a bit of chaos. Yeah, this is kind of like a township approach there. And that's exactly what it is, an informal settlement. And just look at the mess that's taking place there. Absolutely crazy. Joubert, my Afrikaans pronunciation is atrocious. For those who've heard me speak Afrikaans know that. Hence, my most famous sentence in Afrikaans is "Ik praat nie Afrikaans nie." But Joubert Wesen, I would say that German Wesen, or Joubert Wesen, says, Chris, a fantastic channel. Well, thank you so much. I'm really trying. I'm putting some effort into this. By the way, you should know that every video that you watch from me, not a single moment of it is edited. You'll not notice any of this me talking and jerking about sort of thing. I haven't edited my videos. Now, I'm not commenting that that's a bad thing. It's probably just showing my lack of expertise in editing videos. But for now, none of my videos, either the live streams when you watch a replay or any of the prepared videos, are edited. So in most of my videos that are prepared, you won't find too many stumbles or mistakes because I know the material and I'm comfortable sitting in front of the camera. Occasionally you'll catch me, especially when I do a late night one. We all make mistakes. But my point is that this is all coming from me. It's not me reading a script, although in the interest of full disclosure, I do make some notes and keep a little whiteboard around just to make sure that I catch the high points. So you might catch me peeking at that occasionally. But by and large, virtually everything you hear is coming directly out of my brain pan from my own analysis and my own experience commenting on events around the world, but particularly focused on Africa at this point. Yeah, Raymond's disgusting. Yeah, absolutely. What's with these people? You know, this is insane. The things that are just incomprehensible about what government officials are doing. Dallas, Texas, the city of Dallas clears out the jails of people suspected of serious crimes and those convicted of serious crimes and dumps them on the streets, by the way, without informing the victims of the crimes that some of these people committed, which is a standard practice in many police departments around the country here. If you are releasing a criminal at the end of their term or they're getting early release, normally the victim's family is notified so that they're aware of this, or the victim, say someone has been raped by a person who's in jail. If you're going to release a rapist, you normally, as a courtesy, inform the person who was the victim in this case so that they can be aware that this person is now out on the street. But this wasn't happening by and large around the U.S. where authorities were dumping these criminals onto the street. Yes, I'm sure there's a few people in prison who never committed the crime and somehow got put in prison, but the vast majority of these people are guilty of what they've done. My point is that they dump these people in the streets, and at the same time, they take a woman who's a business owner that runs a salon in Dallas, and because she irritated a judge, an arrogant, shameful, badly behaving judge, and I've seen the video footage of his comments and his arrogance and his haughtiness from the bench, telling her she was selfish in trying to reopen her business. By the way, a business in which she kept people on the street at 6 feet. The space is marked out for social distancing. They had masks. She was taking temperatures of clients before they entered. If they didn't hit the temperature range, she turned them away. This is all caught on video footage shown on the news in Texas. And so the cops rolled out and arrested her, took her to court, fingerprinted her like a common criminal, took her photograph, booked her, threw her in a jail cell, and then she went to court. And when she was arraigned, and the judge gave her a 7-day jail sentence because she was unwilling to apologize for reopening her business. And so she went to jail, the same jails that the officials in Dallas had just vacated dozens of criminals from. They threw her in. So it's safe to put the criminals on the streets. I know this is an issue in South Africa today that we're talking about, but it's safe to put the criminals on the streets. But you take law-abiding citizens who you make arbitrary rules, which are not laws, contrary to what people say. These are not laws. These are actions taken under existing law in certain states and jurisdictions. They're not laws. No legislature has passed a law saying, say, for instance, no parliament has passed a law in South Africa saying you can't sit on a beach. That's not a law. That's a law under apartheid. You couldn't sit on certain beaches if you were white or black. You couldn't sit here. Yeah, blankies, knee blankies. No, you couldn't do that during apartheid. Yeah, there were laws for that, but there's no law saying you can't sit on a beach, a public beach in South Africa. But under the National Coronavirus Command Council's dictates, which is not a legitimate body, at least that's the position of the Democratic Alliance, which is taking the government to court over this issue, you can't simply say that it's a law. It's a restriction that's put in place under an existing law. It's a very different sort of situation. And that's what happened in Texas. So this stuff with government authorities violating their own restrictions and laws, in the case of South Africa, the Johannesburg Metro Police and the Red Ants out operating in the midst of the lockdown after the justice minister banned that activity. No one can be evicted from their informal settlements for the duration of the lockdown, yet it's been happening in South Africa. And you can see it's happening in Nairobi. 7,000 people in the southwest part of Johannesburg. I think the figure was about 1,500 people that were affected by this in that one raid that took place over a period of a weekend and then the following week. Shameful, shameful, shameful. And hopefully there's a warm spot in Hades for people who do things like this. It's simply wrong. Now, this is coming from someone that believes in the rule of law. And it is unlawful for these people to be squatting on public land. They should not be there. But you don't do this in the midst of a pandemic. If it's so critical that we maintain social distance, if it's so contagious and so dangerous that we must shut the world's economy down, cause undue misery, hunger, starvation, suicides, desperation, despair, then why do we have governments going out and destroying what little abodes that people have? So they have no choice but to move around and spread a virus. It makes no sense whatsoever. The actions people make don't correspond with what's going on in reality here, folks. Let's see what else. Hey, Tercia, welcome. I still believe there's a way to handle the situation better. The Metro should identify land for informal development. Well, yeah, Tercia, they should have long done that. The Johannesburg Metro has had 26 years now since the end of apartheid to have identified land for informal settlements. And they could have not made informal. They could have gone out in the veld and dug up the ground and put in power lines and put in sewage lines. And then they don't have to build the structures initially. They can even just put the utility infrastructure in so that it's safe and cleaner for people. But no, they haven't done that. That's not what they're focusing on. That's not their priority. Yep. Except when it comes to elections, and suddenly there's a food parcel and a T-shirt and a cap, as Ronaldo likes to say. And that's not exactly original on Ronaldo's part, but he's correct in that. That's exactly what happens during election campaigns. Only provide a slab with one bathroom. There you go. All right, well, that's exactly where I was going. I swear I didn't see that comment, Tercia. I was just addressing the first one. That's exactly right. It's just think of it like a campsite. You go to campgrounds and you pull up with your caravan, you plug it in to an electrical outlet, you plug it in your sewage line into a sewage line there, and there's a tap there, and you pay a fee for it. Well, the Johannesburg Metro could have been doing this over the course of the last 26 years, building sites like that in lieu of permanent sites. No, They just ignore a problem until someone decides they want to do something about it, and then people have already been established for a long time. And they feel that they have a sense of entitlement, some folks, to this land they're squatting on. Anyway, yeah. ICE says, I assume that's the state doing that, or was it more local than that? No, it was a local authorities in Dallas that did that. ICE had her arrested, the Dallas police, to my knowledge. But you appear in a court. I don't know if he's a state official, or a federal official, or a local county judge. We have judges at all three levels. So, for instance, we vote for judges in the U.S. In Ohio, I got to vote on Supreme Court justices, people running for, or not Supreme Court justices, local county court justices and things like that. You get to vote on them. We also vote for our sheriffs. Yeah, our county sheriffs, our local police in each of the county jurisdictions, we get to vote on those people. By the way, some of our sheriffs aren't even law enforcement professionals. They're people who come from other walks of life, and they get voted in to be the sheriff. So it's kind of interesting, a little bit different than other places. We actually get to select our chief law enforcement official. Like here in York County, Pennsylvania, I get to vote for my sheriff. Now, most people have no idea who these people are, so they usually vote along party lines. But people who are from the area know the candidates, rather than those who moved in recently actually vote for who they think is the appropriate person to be their sheriff. Let's see what else. Shug Walters, it is politicians and misuse their power, shameful, disgusting. Absolutely, Shug. I'm with you 100%. Skug, sorry. 100% with you. That is absolutely wrong. The moral incorrectness of this is really, really disgusting. So Bradley says we need to out and change the puppet masters. Once the puppet strings go limp, new blood can take over. Well, there you go, folks. And I'm making a video here shortly talking about South Africa's Renaissance, in which I'll talk about the number of votes that are left on the table by the opposition parties, because people are not voting for the ANC. They've never even come close to achieving the over 12 million votes that they got in 1994. Now they dropped down in the tens and then back up to 11 million briefly in each of the national elections, but they're back down to just over 10 million votes. And that's with a country that's now almost twice as large as it was. It was 34 million in 94. Now you're talking about 57, 58 million people. So it's about 2/3 larger, and they are getting fewer votes, fewer and fewer. But the opposition hasn't capitalized on this by and large, and I'll talk about that in an upcoming prepared video and maybe on another stream. So Rajal says, when am I supposed to get anything done with you YouTubers grabbing my attention all the time? Also need to, I think, Well, okay. Well, that's a fair point. But I think that a number of folks are doing these streams and going on YouTube either for making money, for those who make money. I don't make money on my channel. Not yet. Maybe I'll get around to doing that, but that's not the focus at the moment. Either for making money, for stroking their ego. I'm sure we all probably do it a little bit for that, some more than others. Anyway, but it's not really about that, but just being, honest here. And then I think a lot of us are doing it now, honestly, and not to be facetious, but kind of as a public service. I mean, a lot of people are stuck at home, especially those who are elderly, nowhere to go, nothing to do. And, Netflix gets old, especially when they pull their shows after 2 successful seasons and leave us hanging. Show's gone. So, yeah, kind of as a public service. So sorry to intrude on your day, but thanks for being here. I appreciate you coming in. Yeah, so anyway, it's kind of keep people informed and just kill some time for people. For today, for me, this actually involves a lot of effort, guys. So listen, doing this stream this morning, 8 o'clock local for me, so 2 p.m. in South Africa. I'll be on for a bit, and then when this is over, I think Ronaldo usually is on at 10 o'clock my time, so 4 o'clock your time. I'll be doing some work here and probably listening to Ronaldo in the background. And then after that, by the way, at 11:30, I will be on today, so I can take some more of your time, Rajal. Take some more of your time, 11:30, so 5:30 your time. I will be on Joe Emilio's channel. Joe, the comedian who was my guest last Saturday on my regularly scheduled Saturday live stream, which doesn't intrude into your week. So Joe is doing a stream today, and we're going to talk about the U.S. Space Force. That's right. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the U.S. Space Force. Its bold new mission. Its 5-year mission to boldly go where no one has gone before. Yes, U.S. Space Force. I'll be talking about that on Joe Emilio's channel. So if you don't know Joe, I encourage you to go check it out. Do a search for Joe Emilio, and you will find him. If you can't find him that way, do Joe Emilio South Africa, or Joe Emilio the comedian. It's the Joe Show, but there's a lot of things called the Joe Show, so you got to be careful. Yeah, but Joe was on my show. I had a very good time. I think a lot of people enjoyed that last Saturday for my live stream. He was a very kind guest, agreeing the same day to come on my show. Joe has his own channel, and as I said, he's an American who has Egyptian slash South African background from his mother, and his father's an American. So he was born in Texas, and then they moved to Egypt, which apparently angered him as a child. And he didn't forgive his parents for a long time. He was upset that they took him to Egypt because he didn't like Egypt. And then he moved to South Africa as an adult. He's been there performing comedy for 10 years now. I don't know how long he's been in South Africa, but he's been doing comedy for 10 years. So Joe Emilio's channel, I'll be on there, U.S. Space Force, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Of course, we weren't politically correct in 1966. It was where no man has gone before. But these days, it's where no one has gone before. Apparently, one day it'll be where theirs and these and does and those go. Anyway, we'll stay away from that gender pronoun nonsense today. Yeah, so hey, Dogbreaker, good to see you. That's another cool name. Justicos and Dogbreaker have the coolest handles when it comes to YouTube and whatever else social media is. It's good stuff. I love it. I love it. Ice has got a cool one too, but it took me a while to figure Ice's out. I guess I wasn't that bright. Yeah, Tercia, yeah, it almost looks like I stole your thunder talking about those informal settlements, setting them up for utilities. But no, honestly, it wasn't. We're thinking of the same mind. We're thinking the same way. Good stuff there. But look, you're sitting there, I'm sitting here. We came up with this. It's not a very expensive thing to do. There's lots of public land. In fact, the state's one of the largest landowners in South Africa. Why aren't authorities doing this? I would tell you it's because they're not serious about land reform, land restitution, and the land issue. It's simply a political cudgel to beat people over the head and to bifurcate society on a racial basis and blame white people for land. If you're born free, what do you have to do with this? You're born after 94, whether you're white, you're black, you're colored, you're Asian. Nothing. Right. So schools are opening partially from June 1st. Yeah, I heard that. I'll believe it when I see it. I understand it's just grades 6 and 12, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I'm confusing that with Botswana. Anyway, yeah, different countries are doing now. So Dr. says, good afternoon. It's like having a company you don't like your boss, you just can't vote him out. Yeah, well, yeah, it makes sense. Appreciate your insights and information. Well, KMH, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you tuning in and taking the time to watch my stream. Like I say, something I wanted to do for a long time, many years ago, long before the Santa Claus appearance and the ridiculously long hair from my perspective. If in the military, that's not the kind of hair I've had most of my life. But long before I wanted to do this, I said I've had a YouTube channel since 2006, but I had not been utilizing it. I only had one video on there, which has 4,300 views, by the way. Until my channel catches fire and I get videos that get more than 4,300 views, it's going to stay up there, listed as my most viewed video because it's been there for 13 years. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't do social media like this for YouTubing because, well, part of the reason is I was in Africa a lot of the time. And even if I could do it, I didn't have the bandwidth. You're paying for the data. And even when I could get the data, it was unreliable almost everywhere I was at in Africa. So the times have changed. Things are better now in many places. And people watch things on their phone. But anyway, so now that I'm no longer serving active duty, I can do this sort of thing. And so it's something I want to do. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing it now. Just happens to be that the COVID-19 crisis coincides with this at the time right after I started my channel, started it up again. So. Yep. Scott says, with the schools opening from June 1st, there's absolutely no reason for any form of lockdown. Yeah, social distancing mask will suffice. I agree. And that's a point I make. Yesterday, I went shopping at the local gardening store, and those places are allowed to be open under our lockdown. By the way, here in Pennsylvania, some counties will lower their lockdown. I don't know what the levels are. We don't have numbers. We have colors, you know. I think it goes to yellow for Cumberland County, which is about 15 kilometers from where I'm sitting right now. And that's where I used to teach the Army War College. So I went over there to collect my mail from the post. And then I also ran by the outdoors place, the home improvement place, Lowe's, which is like Home Depot, if you know Home Depot. So I went by there so that I could check into getting some soil. And I got soil. While I was standing in line, I was having a conversation with a couple of older ladies who were standing behind me. And that's exactly the point I was making. This is just ludicrous. I mean, look, people were out here shopping. They're wearing masks, which I take issues with the efficacy of, but I'm not going to argue that point. At the moment, but people are wearing their masks, they're maintaining social distance, they're using contactless payments when possible. People are by and large not using cash, although it's not prohibited. So why can't we do this everywhere? Why can't businesses go back to business? Why can't people sell cars again? Why can't people go to restaurants again? Now, restaurants is a bit dicier. That may take longer. So, okay. But most businesses that have been shut down, which is the majority of businesses, are being put out of business because of irrational, arbitrary measures that make no sense whatsoever. So, Scott, I'm with you entirely. Star Wars. Where's that coming from? Brady says his question is along the same lines with school transport. Parents stuck in level 1 have to pay school fees. Yeah, I'm stumped too, man. Okay, I'm going to generalize now. Hollywood's fault. You seem very anti-bombastic, well-spoken, and use very few profanities considering Force Alpha image use. Well, okay. I can use profanity, and I'm not afraid to use it, but I prefer that these videos be something that lots of folks can check out, and they're available for folks. So it's not really something that I'm going to do a lot on here. I'll use a few words. That's kind of why I like Afrikaans. I can say cock all the time, and even in English you can say that, but it's spelled differently, and it means essentially the same thing, kaka. So anyway, so yeah, no, thank you very much. I think it's a kind compliment and generous statement. No, you'll find that in our military, the U.S. military, the majority of officers are not these Rambo types running around trying to, where can I get my knife and who am I going to hunt down and I want to go in combat. That's not what it's all about. The vast majority of us are dedicated professionals who do this because we are not just looking for an affectation, but in many cases, if not most cases, it's about patriotism and contributing to your country. I did 36 and a half years. I didn't have to do that. I could have retired 16 years before that and walked away with a pension. I could have, now I get a larger pension because I stayed longer, but that's not why I stayed. When I actually decided to stay longer, I wouldn't have gotten as large a pension as I get now, but they changed the law. I just got very lucky there. So I got a larger pension, but I could have got a pension 16 years ago, walked away in my 30s and done something completely different. Anyway, yeah, so no, most people aren't bombastic. Yeah, some are. That's just, you get that in every cohort. But most people are intelligent, critical thinkers, and they try to know something about the world, in part because the U.S. military is so frequently around the world, and we have been since the Second World War. We've been deployed all over the world. For decades, we had a presence in the Philippines, South Korea, in Japan, in Italy, Greece, Turkey, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Spain, West Germany. Need I go on? And we had it in France until we were kicked out by Charles de Gaulle in the 1960s when he withdrew from the NATO command structure. So we've had troops all over the world for decades, and we're often told we should be good ambassadors for our country. So most of us try to do that, and our enlisted soldiers much in the same way. But you get bad apples. But anyway, by and large, that's how people are. So thank you for that kind compliment. So Space Force equals Star Wars in real life. Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to talk Space Force and show. So let me cover two more things here about the news, and then we'll get back to some other things here. So in Cameroon, now, who would have predicted this? But in Cameroon, a prophet who's there claimed he could heal people by laying his hands on them. You know, those preachers who, here, you're healed. Well, that's what he was doing in Cameroon. He died yesterday after touching people infected with COVID-19, claiming he could heal them from COVID-19. He contracted it and then a week later died. Yeah, okay. Who could have predicted that one? Right. And in Zimbabwe, back to Cloud Cuckoo land once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is really distressing. But Cloud Cuckoo land, Zimbabwe, 3 opposition party women were abducted after a local protest in Harare, and they were taken to a police station and then removed from there and bundled into a car with plainclothes officials. No one knows who they are, if they're government agents or they're hired thugs. They were driven away about 150 kilometers, I think it was, from Harare to some remote location, thrown in a pit, urinated on, and beaten repeatedly and sexually assaulted. One is a member of parliament, and the other 2 are other members of the opposition movement for democratic change in Zimbabwe. Yeah, so once again, we see extrajudicial abuse of Zimbabweans taking place in the midst of ZANU-PF governance in Zimbabwe. Disheartening, shameful, and just the standard, typical sort of thing you can expect to see in Zimbabwe. It's really unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen. But for their part, the government is denying this, although initially it was reported in government media that these people were arrested. Then subsequently, the government has said, no, they never arrest these 3 people. They don't know anything about this. So really, really sad. By the way, while we're chatting here, very quickly, I gave this update a while ago, and there's very little change to it. But The State Department issued a press release yesterday in which they gave an update on U.S. government's global response to COVID-19. Now, I mention this because, well, one, I'm an American. I'm proud of what my government's done to help others, although I think it's not adequate in some respects. Now, that's ironic coming from a person who doesn't believe in aid. But in a crisis, aid is a different story than habitual aid to keep a country or government running. That's not what I'm in favor of. I much prefer trade and balanced economic relationships. But in the COVID-19 crisis, and the reason I think that the State Department did this is because the Chinese are now trumpeting their kindness and their generosity in places like Africa, where they're supposedly doing great, wonderful things in the aftermath of Wuhan coronavirus, which, of course, as we all know, is magically being cured in China, a country of 1.6 billion people that only has 82,000 cases of coronavirus, even though the outbreak began in Wuhan. And it took the government about 5 to 6 weeks before they shut down Wuhan and stopped people from leaving it and started, spraying people with sanitizer and, hosing them down. 3 to 5 million people left the city carrying the virus with them all over China and to Hong Kong. But miraculously, through the grace of something, the Chinese have only a handful of cases. Anyway, so so the State Department issued a release on the 19th, so yesterday, and this was in the evening. So they talked about the assistance for COVID-19, the State Department and USAID, that's our development for agency, United States Agency for International Development, have provided nearly $300 million emergency health assistance from USAID's Global Health Emergency Reserve Fund for contagious infectious disease outbreaks and global health programs account. So they have a specific account just to help people with that. And then nearly $300 million in humanitarian assistance from the International Disaster Assistance account. More than $150 million from the Economic Support Fund account. Now that's a State Department account. The first two were from USAID. And nearly $160 million in humanitarian assistance from the Migration and Refugee Assistance account, which is also State Department. So that all adds up to that's over $900 million in assistance. Now, much of that assistance was already announced back in March and April. They talked about a lot of the stuff. But the reason I mention this is that in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, I laid out all the countries. And once again, for 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, although there's more than 40, but for 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the U.S. government has provided $254 million. Now, why does that matter? Well, that matters because unlike the debt relief that the IMF and the World Bank have granted to 19 African countries, the amount of money that those countries will get as a benefit of that is the money they don't have to pay back in loans right now. So each month, that's a small amount of money. But here, this is direct cash assistance that was handed over to help out in these countries. And so some of the biggest beneficiaries of this are the Central African Republic with $10 million in aid, the DRC with $27 million in assistance, Ethiopia with $23.4 million, Mali with $8.4, Mozambique $6.8, Niger $5.4, Nigeria $30.3 million in emergency COVID assistance, Somalia $17.1 million, South Sudan $21.8 million, Sudan $24.1 million. Sudan, a country that does not get along with the U.S., is among the largest recipients of emergency COVID-19 assistance from the U.S. government. Go figure. Yeah, Zimbabwe, $5 million. Yes, but we will endlessly hear the officials from ZANU-PF go on television and tell us how the sanctions have crippled Zimbabwe's economy. Yes, the travel restrictions on a handful of government officials and state-owned entities that those officials pilfer from to the detriment of Zimbabweans. That's the reason for the economic disaster. But nonetheless, we've given $5 million in emergency assistance to help out. Now, that's not much on each of these countries. Oh, and for South Africa, for those of you in South Africa, the figure is $8.4 million to the government of South Africa. Now, to his credit, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Keep confusing him with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his most recent speech after disappearing for 3 weeks and finally coming out and speaking to the nation a few days ago, thanked the United States government for the delivery of ventilators. We had shipped ventilators to South Africa. And so he didn't mention the dollar amount of this aid, which is separate from the ventilators. But nonetheless, thank you so much for that mention, Cyril Ramaphosa. It's rare that ANC politicians take the time and the courtesy to mention how much assistance the American people give to South Africa and have historically given to South Africa. Anyway, so not among the largest recipients in Africa, but certainly better than some of these countries. So for instance, Angola got just $570,000 from the U.S. government. And let's see another small one here. Another small one would be Namibia with just $750,000. So, and Botswana also got a small amount. So some of these countries got a fair amount of money to help out with the COVID-19 crisis. And hopefully it is making a difference. This is helping for surveillance, testing, monitoring, things like that. So hopefully it is making a difference. What happened? What happened to Nelson Chamisa? Why is he not coming through in Zim rigged elections? Yeah, the ZANU-PF stole the elections. Chamisa won that election. There's no doubt in my mind that they stuffed ballot boxes and ballot boxes went missing, especially in eastern part of Zimbabwe, in the Mashona land, the Shona heartland. The opposition MDC, because Emerson Mnangagwa was trying to look like a legitimate candidate for president, even though he was an illegitimate president, by the way. For those who don't remember, he fled the country, effectively resigned or forfeited his post as vice president, and left and fled to South Africa after he claimed that his opponents in Grace Mugabe's faction tried to poison him at a county fair by giving him poisoned ice cream. He got sick. So he fled the country and went to South Africa seeking asylum, effectively giving up his post as vice president. Yet the army reinstalled him as president when they had a coup and overturned Mugabe. So he was an illegitimate president to begin with. But then he ran for office, but in an effort to look legitimate in the eyes of viewers around the world and for officials paying attention to the election in Zimbabwe, what he did was, sorry, hair's getting out of control there. What he did was he allowed the opposition to campaign without much interference. So the campaign was a rare one in Zimbabwe, in which the Movement for Democratic Change could actually campaign without campaign violence. There was some, without abductions, without murders. There was some of that taking place, but not the usual level that takes place from ZANU-PF. So they campaigned in the Eastern Highlands, a place that traditionally is not a stronghold for the opposition. More of their vote comes from Mashonaland and the urban centers, because it started as a trade union movement under Morgan Tsvangirai and others who started the party. So when they started the MDC over 20 years ago, they focused on the tradesmen and workers and union and people, members of unions, and then they spread from there a little bit. But so that was their main support base, and always has been. And then also in Mashonaland, not Mashonaland, excuse me, in Ndebeleland, in the western side of the country. So that was the MDC's historical base. So in this last election, in a genuine effort to try to win after the untimely and unfortunate death of Morgan Tsvangirai from cancer, Nelson Chamisa campaigned aggressively in the Eastern Highlands and Mashonaland, and they had massive crowds. Excellent videographic evidence of this. You can see it. And then the election takes place, and Mnangagwa magically wins after it takes a long time for the election results to be collated and distributed. In fact, there were demonstrations in the streets of Harare, people demanding that the vote results be released. And that's one of the reasons why the military fired on protesters to disperse them and killed a number of people. Yeah, so Nelson Chamisa, in my book, won the election. It's not the first stolen election by ZANU-PF. They've stolen at least 2 elections since 2000, maybe another. So that's what happened. But now he has another problem, because the court is directed that he is not the head of the party, that the party never had an appropriate Congress, although I really don't, well, I won't get into the technicalities of it, what role the government plays in deciding who's legitimate, who's not legitimate when it comes to the internal workings of the party. They do have their internal constitution and guidelines and bylines, and so they have to abide by them. But a judge has interceded and said that he's not the legitimate leader of the MDC, and so they must hold another Congress and vote for a leader. For their part, the majority of members of parliament have argued that Nelson Chamisa is the legitimate leader of the MDC. Whatever the case is, this is a typical situation. The MDC just can't get its act together. They're not really prepared to govern, which is unfortunate for Zimbabweans, because ZANU-PF is prepared to govern, but in a way that is a cancer on society and eats away at liberties and freedoms of Zimbabweans and destroys the country while they pilfer. Not all. There are legitimate politicians in ZANU-PF, but far too many are not, and that's the problem. So why would the UN approve the Zim result? I guess the answer is on ZANU-PF. Well, the world didn't really approve the Zim result. The United States, the United Kingdom, many Western European countries, other countries vociferously complained about the irregularities in the election. There were outside observers who verified it and said it was legitimate. But so what? That doesn't make it legitimate. There is definitely collusion amongst global elites when it comes to governance and perpetuating elites. And, you know, it's really sad. I mean, where are the, okay, why am I sitting in central Pennsylvania, not an African? Why am I the person that's pointing out what's wrong with Nairobi and government officials? Where are Kenya-based groups, civil rights groups, talking about this. Where's the African Union, which is right next door in Ethiopia? Why are they not making noise about this, either quietly to the officials in Kenya or publicly shaming them for what they're doing? Where are other African leaders? Where is Cyril Ramaphosa? Well, he's not speaking out about what's happening in Nairobi because his own government is doing it. Juniors, subordinates in his own party are doing it to people living around Johannesburg. And I'm sure it's happening elsewhere, but we know about Johannesburg because we have multiple press reports, video footage, interviews, and things like that. Why is it up to Wyatt to be the person speaking out for all these people who are being dispossessed and kicked out of a place, even though I don't think they have any business being there, but I would not kick them out? Yeah, it's a good question. Where's the world? Now, Zimbabwe's election was fraudulent, and the conduct of ZANU-PF in tallying the votes, and then the magical way that he just managed to get just enough votes to win. It's just not credible. Now, in the past, ZANU-PF would have fudged the results much differently, and they would have been further apart, but I think Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF realized they couldn't give it a 62 to 38 result because that would be too obvious, and so it would have to be closer. But yeah, I don't think that Mnangagwa won. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, what would it have mattered anyway? If Chamisa had won, the MDC didn't win enough members or enough parliamentary seats to take over the government. And I do think the results there were pretty much legitimate in most cases. So if they can't take over the parliament, then they have a president who has an opposition parliament. What is Chamisa going to get accomplished? It'd be similar to the unity government in which SADC shamefully forced the winning party, the MDC, into a coalition government with the ZANU-PF government, which retained control of the intelligence services, the police, and the military, and handed over the finance ministry to MDC, who fixed Zimbabwe's finances, but they had no real power beyond that. And so they were ineffective, feckless in many respects, and then carried the stink of having failed governance when things went south in Zimbabwe. And so they found themselves falling behind in the next election after that. That was one of the worst decisions they ever made. I understand why they did it, but at the same time, Morgan Tsvangirai becoming the prime minister did not help the people of Zimbabwe. Not because Morgan Tsvangirai was not a good guy, not because he was ineffective, but because ZANU-PF still ran the country. That's right. That's what happened. So there you go. So that's what's going on with Nelson. Let's see what else. Will Africa ever be free from foreign aid and become truly independent? Blues Pixie, I think it's a very good question. There's a propensity for folks, Paulie says not in this lifetime, there's a propensity for folks to all too easily accept foreign aid or become dependent on it. Countries that take foreign aid only in response to a crisis or who will accept aid, but it will not become the basis of their governance, those are countries that tend to do much better. So, for instance, Botswana has been very successful for a number of reasons, and we've given a lot of assistance to them over the years, and we're not alone. Other countries have as well. But Botswana has never, since the early days of its republic, been heavily reliant on aid. Most of it's come from its own growth, and the aid that it gets, it's by and large used well. Now, I should mention that most of the assistance the U.S. government gives today, with the exception of this COVID-19 situation, most of our assistance no longer goes to foreign governments because we've been burned too many times in the past. Now, this changed a good 20 years or so ago. Most of the assistance we give in grant assistance goes to third parties, non-governmental organizations, charitable organizations, businesses, and things like that, that provide services and goods for people or fix infrastructure. So, for instance, we'll contract with the government's approval with someone else to build a road in a country, and USAID will provide the funding to build that road, but the government won't be building that road. And it'll be a road that only will be built if it's a road that benefits more than just the president by driving to his royal mansion and only there. So yeah, so there's a lot of reason put into U.S. assistance, but yeah, aid is not an ideal way to do things. Damisisa Moyo famously wrote her book about aid a few years ago, and before that, White Man's Burden by Easterly is a fantastic book talking about aid. And then there's another one I read about Equatorial Guinea a few years back. But yeah, I've never been a big fan of aid. I'm from the Bible to teach a man to fish? You can feed a man, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him to fish, and he can feed himself. You need to develop self-sufficiency. There are countries in Africa that are largely self-sufficient when it comes to this sort of thing. But there are other countries that are perpetually going to be sucking on the teat, and that's going to go into perpetuity. It's just not going to change anytime soon. So, Moketsi Mujoro, Lesotho economist and politician is now the new. Oh yeah. Thank you, Anton. Actually, I reported on that last week, last week. Yeah, it was last week. I reported on because Tom Tabani had to be out by the 22nd, so I guess he's resigned. So that is news. Thank you for that breaking news, Anton. That's excellent. Well, excellent. Lesotho is a basket case, but fascinating place, beautiful scenery, interesting people, and you got to respect their ability to fight for their independence and retain their kingdom in the face of tough opposition, both from other Africans and from the Boers who came through on the Great Trek, moving up through the Orange Free State into the Transvaal. The Basotho people who used to occupy much of what's the Free State today pushed back into the mountains, and Moshoeshoe managed to fight off the Boers and other Africans and defend their mountain kingdom. But not much arable land in Lesotho, so they're perpetually using their biggest resources, which is exporting labor to South Africa to raise money for the country, and selling their water from the Highlands Water Project to South Africa, which desperately needs water. Yep. So Blues Pixie says some documentaries portray the situation as foreign aid keeping Africa from developing so the original colonists can remain in control of mineral riches. Propaganda, Blues Pixie, absolute propaganda. There is no intent to give this money to keep people in bondage. For starters, if that were the case, why would Japan and the US be amongst the largest donors to developing countries? Neither of us are colonial powers. Now, if you really want to stretch the argument and claim the U.S. is an empire and that we have colonial interest even though we don't have colonies, okay, I'm not going to buy that, but let's accept that. But since the end of the Second World War, in which it was spanked badly and 2 nuclear bombs were dropped, atomic bombs were dropped on the top of it, Japan has not been a colonial power and has become re-engaged in the world and has given billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and if not trillions at this point, probably hundreds of billions in foreign assistance to developing countries in Asia, but also in Africa. Why are the Japanese giving the money? What do they get from it? South Africans and Africans buy Toyotas, but that's about all I could possibly. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch. No, that's propaganda. That's utter nonsense. That's leftist tripe. That's not intention. You want to make that case, say the French or the Brits, okay? Then if the intent is to give them the aid to keep Africans dependent, which was a legitimate argument with France in the 60s when independence took place, but it was part of a bigger package of political control and the fact that 7 French infantry battalions were based in former Francophone African countries. Yeah, 7 French infantry battalions. Not the French Foreign Legion, but French infantry units were based. There's one in Cote d'Ivoire. There was one in Gabon. There was one, I think, there were 7 of them in Africa up until just the last 20 years. And that's when they started going away. But the Brits have been dramatically reducing their foreign assistance in Africa for the past 20 years. Yeah. So DFID, the British Development Agency, has had fewer and fewer resources in Africa. So if the idea was to keep these colonies dependent on the metropolitan, the colonial empire, UK and France, then why are the UK reducing funding? It doesn't make any sense. It's propaganda. It's utter nonsense. There was a legitimacy to it in some cases early on, particularly in the 50s and 60s, maybe even into the 70s. You could make that case, but only for former colonial powers, not to explain the aid from the rest of the world. So it's not a big conspiracy to keep people in. Neither, excuse me, neither is the existence of the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, a conspiracy to make people debt slaves. That story is just utter nonsense. I've debunked that so many times, it makes my head spin. Those organizations existed to bring the world into as much as possible unified exchange rate mechanism for currency trading and for balance and to rebuild Europe after the Second World War. Remember, the World Bank was the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development. That's what its name was. It only became known as the World Bank later. And both those organizations existed to fix the wild currency fluctuations and also to provide lending to restructure and rebuild after the Second World War, not to impoverish and indebt countries in the developing world. That function of giving money to countries in the developing world came later in the 60s and 70s, and those countries got themselves in a bind. And oh, by the way, on 2 different occasions, the U.S. has led the effort and has forgiven all the debt for several countries, particularly in Africa. Ghana, Mozambique have had billions of dollars wiped off. So they borrowed money and it was forgiven. And now they borrowed more money and more money and more money. And now we have African finance ministers running around saying, forgive our debt, forgive our debt. Well, once bitten, twice shy, folks. Let's see. All right, Bantu Holomisa. Proper teacher man. Yeah, Matu Holomisa. That's correct. Yep. Thank you, Drian. Bradley says, thank you for your wealth of knowledge. I have got to work. Then I know. Oh, I got work to do. I'll catch you on the next stream. All right. Thanks for checking in, Bradley. Appreciate you taking off. Bismarck Bear, welcome. Good to see you. Apologize, this question's already been answered by today. Your opinion on the SA organization Südlanders. Also, sorry if this has nothing to do with the current topic. What specifically do you want me to talk about there, Bismarck? I don't know a lot about them. I did subscribe to their Twitter feed today, but that's because I was doing something else and it was recommended. Yeah, let me hold that for another one. I'll make a note of that. So we'll talk about that on another one, so I can see if there's something specific that you're looking for, or my thoughts on it. Or if you got a specific question beyond that, maybe rather than just my opinion. That's kind of open-ended. So give me a better view on that. Blues Pixie also curious about Südlanders since Roman thinks it's a right-wing trap set up by the state. That's interesting. So for those who remember, the Bormog, do you remember the Bormog? The dangerous terrorist group of right-wing extremists. Yes, actually, the Bormog was dangerous. They had some really crazy ideas to upset and overthrow the government. So it was a legitimate threat. But funny thing happened here in the U.S. back in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. The FBI infiltrated many radical groups that were for civil rights. They also infiltrated the Black Muslims, the Black Panthers, and groups like that. The not Muslim Brotherhood, Louis Farrakhan's group. Can't think of them right now. But the FBI put people in there who were undercover agents. And a lot of these radical meetings, you would go to them, and it would turn out that 2/4 to 3/3 of the people there were actually government agents for the FBI, local law enforcement, other federal agencies who were all undercover spying on these groups who had very little support. And so by giving it so much emphasis and putting so many agents in it, you actually made the organization appear more powerful than it was. There's a similar situation to the Bormog, which is a very small group of people committed to a very radical and dangerous concept of overthrowing the government. And the number of people involved was very small. We're talking less than 100 in total, and not even close to that who were actively, really legitimately involved in this organization. Like 24 were actually tried for it eventually, something like that. But the Bormog was overblown and blown out of proportion by the state. So while it wasn't a state, hey, morning shot, there's Roman. Tonight at 8:30 South Africa time, that would be 2:30 my time. Hang on, Roman. Well, welcome to my stream, Roman. I didn't know you watched. Good to see you there. So 2:30 my time. I've got 11:30, 1 o'clock. Till 2. Yeah, I could do that, Roman, if you want to chat tonight. Let me make a note of that here too. So Roman tonight, 8:30. So that's 14:30 my time on Roman's morning shot. Yep. Okay. Absolutely, Roman. If you heard me say that, then say, yeah, I saw you there too. Yeah, I can do that today. It's going to be a busy day for me. So that's good. It's better than having nothing to do. People have always said, hey, enjoy your retirement. I can't imagine retiring. I would be bored out of my mind. That would be frustrating. Yeah, so so much like in my mind, the way that the government over-promoted the narrative of the Bormog, who were dangerous. I'm not questioning that. And I think the government was right to send spies to infiltrate them. These people had very nefarious intent. I don't know that the Südlanders is a government attempt to discredit the right in South Africa, but it could be. I don't have enough facts to say that. But I can talk more about that on another stream rather than today. Let's see. So Bismarck Bear says, apologizes. Oh, no, I already asked that. Sorry. Liz Pixie also curious about Südlanders. I already said that. So Sean, hey, Sean. A Japanese gentleman recently made a very generous donation to a church nearby to buy food for the homeless for $1,000. Well, that's awesome. Speaking of food for the homeless and promoting, once again, South African content, ladies and gentlemen, this is another photograph from Johan Orton. Johan is the sports journalist, photographer that I told you about, who's based in South Africa. He's a South African. And we met through LinkedIn a few years ago. And Johan and I have been connected because I build South African connections. And what happened is that he mentioned he was going to the Rugby World Cup. And I said, well, I'm going. And so we agreed to link up in Japan. We did meet twice, in fact, at the Toyota City Stadium, where you see that caricature of me. We met there, but he was on the pitch down at the end of behind the try line, and I was up in the stands, and I couldn't get to the field. So we never did get to have a beer or hang out there, but we did meet a couple of times. Anyway, Johan has kindly sent me his photographs here, and this is from a charitable group of Christians in South Africa who've gone out to provide food to the needy in South Africa. in the midst of this Wuhan coronavirus. Now, I understand that some South Africans have been arrested by the shameful conduct of the police when they've been giving food to the less fortunate who are suffering, and that itself is shameful. It's really shameful how the government is politicizing food parcels and stealing food parcels, some people in the government, and selling them or using them themselves. It's just really bad. But it's not unique to South Africa. We have a situation here in Baltimore where the mayor a few years ago stole gift cards that were meant to be given. They were donated by people, gift cards like to go shopping at local stores so people could buy school clothes for their kids and they could buy necessities for home. So these gift cards were donated by businesses and by private individuals. And the mayor of Baltimore stole the gift cards and redeemed them for herself and her family and friends. She was later convicted of that, I believe. But I mean, this sort of nonsense happens all over. It's not just in South Africa, but it's really shameful in the midst of people starving to death that we have governments doing this, imprisoning and turning into criminals law-abiding citizens, many of them devout Christians who, through the goodness of their own heart, are taking what resources they have and sharing with those in need. Johan has taken some amazing photographs, and this is one of them. So I'm just trying to promote it. I've asked him to give me a banner so I can put an advert up on my site to share with people about his photography. Johan is an amazing photographer. You've probably seen his photographs and maybe not even realized it because he does a lot of rugby coverage. So he had some amazing coverage from the Rugby World Cup. Johan is also the guy who told me about Shink Art. And Shink is the group of folks who do the awesome caricature of me up there wearing the kamikaze, I don't know what they call it in Japan, but anyway, the bandana, waving my Springboks flag. And if you look at that, it's kind of hard to see there, but I'll blow it up a little bit so you can get a good look at this. But this caricature is amazing detail. Oh, now it's not going to come over my camera, but yeah, if you look in here, it's actually got the proper symbols in the proper place, and even that ASICS logo in the center there. Yeah, it's really cool stuff. Shink Art does that. They're based in Bloemfontein. And I had a banner up for that earlier for those who came on the stream early to show you about Shink Art. Anyway, so that's kind of my thing now. I'll put that up. But Johan's art his photography is absolutely amazing. Hey, Ranger Jakes, welcome aboard. Yeah, he's really a really good photographer, and I think I said that's an amazing photograph. It absolutely is. It is a stunning photograph. And he does some other things. So I'm putting them up periodically on each of these streams just to show it to you. So there you go. So I'm promoting 3 businesses to try to help things keep going in South Africa during this lockdown. And it turns out they all happen to be minority-owned businesses in South Africa. That's not my intent. My intent is to help all South Africans if I can, in any way that I can, with promoting their good products and good services. So that's Giselle, an amazing Namibian singer who's from sorry, I can't speak. No Stary Stumpies here. Sorry, Ronaldo, if you're trolling my stream. Just Starbucks. But yeah, so Giselle, who's from Grootfontein in Namibia, and also lived in the Northern Cape growing up. She's a singer who sings folk music, or Heimatlieder, as we would say in German. And she also sings country music. I'm not a fan of that, but hers is good. And then pop, Afrikaans pop. And so I enjoy that. So she's based in Pretoria these days. And I did her live album debut, premiered on my channel on the 8th of May. You can find it under my past live streams. It's an hour and 3 minutes, something for everybody, free of charge, no charge. So check it out for those who haven't seen it. So promoting Giselle's music, and also her manager, Johan Eisel, who's South Africa's best known magician and master illusionist, the guy that famously made the Voortrekker Monument disappear. That's right. Apparently, he was trying to get a high cabinet position in the Zuma government by making the Voortrekker Monument disappear. Now, it came back, so the ANC withdrew the offer. He doesn't work for the ANC as a consequence. Anyway, no cadres were harmed or injured in the making of that very pathetic joke I just gave. But anyway, so Giselle, Johan, who's a magician and illusionist, Johan Orton's photography, and also Shink Art. So those are just a few of those things. So any businesses that I deal with in South Africa that are interested in me promoting it on my channel, I'll do that unless people say, hey, stop doing that. But I'm not getting paid for it. I'm just trying to help folks out. And by the way, the characters are amazing. Hey, Tony Lynn, good to see you there. So I think the characters are amazing. Reasonable prices they have. You'll have to negotiate with them. But if you're interested in the characters that you see at the top of the screen right there, like my little picture right there, then what I suggest is you go to www.shink.co.za. Shink.co.za. Notice how I say ZA? I'm an American. We don't say Z. Canadians say Z, but we don't say Z. We're not a Commonwealth country. We broke away from the empire a long time ago. We earned our independence by telling the Brits, "Sick, we're a hot fold from you guys." out, hit the road. We don't want you here anymore. And then we fought for our independence for another 8 years, and finally, with the Peace of Paris, won our independence, and the British recognized us. But then they came right back in 1812 and invaded our shores after spending 20 years impressing and enslaving our merchant marine as sailors in the British Navy. Yeah. Anyway, so we won that war too. Anyway, and even won a battle after the war was over. The Battle of New Orleans was won by Andrew Jackson after a peace treaty was negotiated and agreed to. So imagine that. Think about these days. Absolutely crazy. Having a battle after the war is over, a decisive battle. So if we hadn't won the war, we probably would have won it based on the results of the Battle of New Orleans. But nonetheless, the Battle of New Orleans, which made Andrew Jackson politically, and he later became the president, and frankly, the first Democratic president of the United States, and one of the most despicable human beings ever to serve as president of the United States. His forced removal of the Cherokees and others on the Trail of Tears, removing them from the eastern third of the United States, where many of them were respectful, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who contributed to the vibrant societies, particularly in places like Georgia and North Carolina, taking their land from them unlawfully, illegitimately, and then shipping them off, and where many of them died en route to Oklahoma, and forever altering the history of Native American history and the history of this country, and creating acrimony that lasts to this day that was wholly unnecessary, all to appease his greedy land speculators who supported him in his run for political office. Andrew Jackson, a piece of crap. That's right, I said it. Unvarnished, my opinion. The first in a long line of Democratic presidents in the United States who've done disreputable things to other Americans. And we conclude in that King Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who interned all Japanese Americans on the West Coast in concentration camps in the United States during the Second World War, in arguably one of the most shameful and racist actions ever took place by the federal government in this country. Yep, we all have warts in our history and can be ashamed of things that have happened. While the progressive lefts hold up Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a great example of how to lead a country, I look at the man who imprisoned Japanese Americans, most of whom were American citizens, not simply immigrants, some 2 and 3 generations here, took their livelihoods, their possessions, imprisoned them, and also the man that extended our Great Depression by at least another 5, possibly 10 years longer than it should have been by his actions and his overreaching government. Also the man is the architect of the social welfare state that consists of many different agencies and persists to this very day. So not a fan of King Franklin, not a fan of Andrew Jackson. 2 less than desirable former presidents of the United States who altered our history, both in ways that I think were counterproductive to the American ideal. And there you go. So there's some political commentary right there. I ask, how many people belong to Zoolander? Could it be 20? I don't know the number for that. It's interesting. I'll do some research and see what I can find. But the problem with that is I think that the sources will not be particularly accurate because those who really know aren't going to disclose it, I think. But I'll take a look. Bismarck says, Roman doesn't understand Boer folklore. The leader is zealot. He is his ideology in a prophecy. Okay. Well, yeah. We all have historical narratives. We all have a bit of historical myths, you know. And the Afrikaner or Boer legacy and myth, you have some very famous events tied into that, not the least of which is the Great Trek. And then you also have, when I say myth, I'm mythology. I'm not talking that's a myth. It didn't happen. The Great Trek did happen. Battle of Blood River did happen. Dingani did kill Pete Retief and murder his entire party, and then murder over almost 400 or 500, something like that, women and children. And as the Boers desperately fought back to stop the Zulu impis that came at them after they murdered Pete Retief and his party. None of that's myth. That's all fact. What I'm saying is the mythology, the ethos that people create, the story, the narrative of their history. There is a degree of mythology that is in the Afrikaner story. I'm not speaking ill of it, just being honest. You have to be honest. There's mythology in our history here in America, things that we say. So, for instance, you know, one of the big things is that for those who do the research, you find out that you talk about genocide. There was genocide against Native Americans. I disagree with that premise. The majority of those who died over the course of history interacting with Europeans, many of them died before they ever met a single European as a consequence of the spread of diseases, which were not brought intentionally. Influenza and smallpox were not brought here on the shores of North America intentionally. They spread to a population that had no resistance to them, and they were wiped out en masse. Hundreds of millions of people died over the course of history through smallpox and influenza, plus other things, but those two. And that was not intentional. But that's one myth. That's not a myth Americans like. And then the other myth is that Europeans came here and that they were friendly with the Indians and the Indians attacked them all the time and pushed back. There's truth in both sides of that argument, and so you have to wade through the mythology of the historical narrative. There's nothing wrong with people weaving things into their mythology and their history to have a sense of pride about their culture and their ethnicity. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to be honest when it comes to a debate or discussion about the actual history of events. That's intellectual honesty, and that's important in life, folks. There is a paucity of intellectual honesty in the world today with people simply contorting narratives for their own political gains. That's always been the case, but with the advent of social media, the 24/7 news networks, the rapid communication, sharing things all over the world instantaneously, and the misuse of information, it's much more challenging these days to have intellectual discussions or honest discussions about events and not simply contort things for political purposes. Yeah, so anyway, let's see. Johan is an amateur. Cyril made our economy disappear and it won't reappear anytime soon. Huh? Sean, what are you talking about? Johan who? What did I miss? I'm sorry. You're not talking about Johan Orton. His camp. Oh, okay. If you're talking about okay, student letters. His campaign read Jackson and no bank because he did not want to renew the bank charter. Oh, you're talking about it. Okay, sorry. Yeah, Blues Pixie. All things considered, bad idea to buy property now. Prices have dropped, but EWC lurking just beneath the surface. Well, that's actually a good question, Blues Pixie. I think it's a very good question. If you're going to buy land in South Africa, you can get it dirt cheap now. People can't move land. But you have to do some serious research, in my view. If you want to buy land in South Africa, you need to take a very hard look at the origins of the land and if there's any outstanding claims against land currently, and also take a look at history to see if there could legitimately be any claims coming up. Now, that's a lot of work, but you know what? If you want to own land, you need to take that approach because the government can already expropriate land in the public interest as long as they pay you a fair market price. If you were to buy land today with the threat of EWC, you're likely to see the value of that land continue to decline, not just because of COVID-19, but also because of the threat of it being expropriated potentially. And so land prices will only be depressed and likely drop after you buy the land, would be my assessment. So what you have to be very careful of is that you make sure that you've done your research so that if and when this expropriation without compensation issue is resolved, then the value of the land can increase. But until South Africa's economy improves, which is not going to happen under EWC, NHI, or BEE at this point, it's not going to become particularly valuable. And that might work to your advantage. If the land is not worth much and you're not buying it for value, you're buying it for usage. If you want to use it to grow trees, you want to use it to grow fruits, or you want to wine, or you just want to cattle graze there, then you can get land really cheap. If you get land cheap enough, say in the Karoo, somebody selling farmland in the Karoo, and there's always farmland available all the time in South Africa. You want to buy farmland in the Karoo and it's dirt cheap and you have the resources, go do it. And think of it as, you have to look at it this way. If you look at land in South Africa today, unless you're buying it for commercial or residential use, if you want to buy land, say farmland in South Africa, because it's so inexpensive at the moment, and it really is in many cases, you have to buy it with the mindset that, okay, let me project it. Let's say that they do go through with expropriation without compensation. There is a challenge to it in the courts. It's denied. It's taken to the Constitutional Court. Then there's another challenge from a different angle, from a different perspective. If EWC were passed tomorrow, it would take at least 5 years before they start confiscating farms in a major way. So the value of land will keep going down because nobody can buy land because it's going to be taken from people. But if you buy land cheaply enough that you can project in your mind that in 5 years you can get your return on that land by whatever you're doing, cattle grazing or growing something, then why not buy the land? Now, hopefully you get land that you actually have legitimate title to and there aren't claims against it and the government doesn't go through with this. I hope that they don't go through with EWC. It's the dumbest thing since well, I want to say since sliced bread. Sliced bread was a good thing, but it is not a particularly smart approach. It reminds me, I forgot to buy bread yesterday. I was supposed to get bread when I was out. Yeah, so I would say that there are instances for people in South Africa that it makes sense to buy land right now, particularly those who've got resources and money. There's a risk risk reward, ratio you have to take a look at here, cost benefit analysis. And there's actually, in some cases, land is so inexpensive right now that the cost benefit, it could be worth it for folks to buy land and use it, at least in the short term. Hopefully you're able to keep the land. But I will tell you this, and I didn't get to this in Ronaldo's discussion about expropriation without compensation. This is the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. If the South African government amends its constitution to have expropriation without compensation, I tell you what will happen. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act will suspend South Africa from participation in all goods and services that South Africa ships to the U.S., which is not insignificant, folks, will now face tariffs, legal, legitimate tariffs. But they'll no longer get the artificial tariff-free advantage that South African goods and services enjoy today, because the African Growth and Opportunity Act requires governments to respect property rights. And by passing expropriation without compensation, they are not satisfying that requirement. So the moment that that legislation is passed, they will lose trade with the United States, and I suspect they will likely lose trade with most European countries, certainly with the United Kingdom, and potentially with all the European Union. Potentially. I can't speak for the European Union because they do all kinds of bizarre things that defy reason at times. So there you go. That's kind of how I feel about that. So what do you guys think about that? Jump in there. By the way, folks, thanks for tuning in today on this midweek morning for me, afternoon for Africa live stream, in which we've discussed some strange news events, including a gentleman in Cameroon, a priest who laid his hands on people to heal them, and then, of course, contracted COVID-19, which he claimed he could heal, and has passed away from that. A Chinese restaurant in Zambia having been closed because it refused to give access to a foreigner. Of course, the foreigner being an indigenous Zambian who tried to go in the Chinese restaurant. So you gotta like that twist on things, right? President Peter Mutharika in Malawi, not on the campaign trail and raising eyebrows across Malawi. Where's Mutharika? And a number of other events. Kenya getting $1 billion in emergency assistance from the World Bank, and then claiming that's because they have sound economy. Nope, it's because you're in desperate straits and there are a few strings attached. But thanks for tuning into this stream. I think almost everybody here is a subscriber already. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please feel free to subscribe to it and smash that button right down there for subscription. Be sure to toggle that little bell icon to make sure that you get my notifications of my streams. Both my regularly scheduled Saturday live stream every Saturday where I bring a guest on. This Saturday, I'll have Herman Roos, who's a tobacco farmer in South Africa. And we'll be talking about tobacco industry and being a farmer in South Africa, among other things, and the challenges normally, but also in the wake of COVID-19. Also, there'll be some pretty sad news when you hear how few people are doing tobacco farming now compared to what it was, say, in '94 or even just 10 years ago in South Africa. So Herman will be my guest. Last Saturday was Joe Emilio, whose program I will be appearing on later this morning after Ronaldo hosts program. His program is at 4. At 5:30, I'll be on Joe Emilio's channel. And now it looks like at 8:30, I'll be on Morning Shot with Roman. So that should be interesting. Be a busy day for me today. Hopefully you guys can catch. Now, the topic on Joe Emilio's show at 5:30 your time is the U.S. Space Force. We'll be talking about space, the final frontier, and the creation of a military branch in the U.S. military forces focused specifically on space. That's the topic at 5:30 South Africa time, 11:30 Eastern Standard Time today. Joe Emilio's show, The Joe Show. And yeah, so thanks for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Listen, I welcome comments, positive and negative. If you agree or disagree with something I've said, and people have done that, you disagree, that's fine. If I'm able to respond to it, I will. If it's an abusive comment, it'll simply be ignored. I don't really delete abusive comments. Sometimes I actually respond to them because I think that trolls need to be addressed. You can't simply ignore them. Some people disagree with my approach on that, but I think if you're measured, polite, and respectful in the face of a troll, then their bare backside is actually exposed and people see them for what they are, and you stay above the fray. It's not easy to do though, folks, because there's some really nasty people out there, but I've been fortunate I haven't seen too much of that, probably because I'm not a big enough fish to get their attention yet. I'm sure that at some point that Beijing and the ANC will both be trying to find me and send trolls my way and bots to harass me. I get some of that on LinkedIn, where I have a very, well, I'd say a pretty large base, approaching 10,000 who follow me on LinkedIn, much larger than my YouTube. But then I've been doing LinkedIn since about 3 months after the company was created, an early adopter as I am on most things. So yeah. And then finally, please smash that like button right there. I don't have any admins in here reminding people to smash the like button. You don't have to actually like the video to push the like button. I mean, consider it if you found the conversation to be thought-provoking, challenging, or you just appreciated that someone said something that differed with you and was willing to share that and take a risk. So you can push the like button for that reason. So I ask that you smash the like button because likes as a percentage of views drive promotion of the video. And I've noticed with my videos, not only have I been gaining subscribers, thank you all for that, but also the number of impressions have climbed, not arithmetically, but exponentially over the last 2 months. So they keep growing as a consequence of me getting more likes on my videos. And that means that YouTube, when someone's searching for something in Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Liberia, Uganda, things I write and talk about, when they're looking for that, they're finding my videos promoted when you go to your channel. And so anyway, that's what the likes are about. It's not about ego. I've got a big enough ego. I don't need the likes for that, but I do appreciate the likes. They're much appreciated. I don't have super chats on my channel. I'm not doing that at the moment. So you can show your appreciation if you have any by subscribing, telling others about the channel, spread that far and wide. In fact, I actually made a mistake myself. One of my former students at the Army War College is a brigadier general. He's brigadier general now in Nigerian forces, Nigerian Army. And I stay in touch with him. And I didn't realize that I had never told him about my channel. I informed a lot of people, and he follows me in a number of places, but he's not on LinkedIn. That's one of my main venues for letting people know. Anyway, I sent him a note or passed him this cartoon about politicians. And a couple of days ago, or yesterday, and he said, "Hey, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm fine." I said, "Hey, did you like my stream about Nigerian security issues?" Since he's in the Nigerian Army, he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, my YouTube channel. Don't you watch my YouTube channel?" He goes, "I didn't know you had a YouTube channel." I'm like, oh. If I can't tell everybody that I know, how am I going to get people? So anyway, it's a bit of a challenge. But anyway, he's subscribed now. The point of mentioning that is that he's a big fan of mine, and he's an outstanding officer in the Nigerian military, and so he is prophesizing for me now in Nigeria. And I noticed already that on LinkedIn I had a few requests from professionals in Nigeria overnight, and I suspect that I'll probably be getting a few subscribers from Nigeria, which is good because I offer Nigeria content as well. It's not just South Africa, although a big part of my audience right now is South Africa, and I'll never abandon that because my first love in Africa is South Africa. And that's the place I first fell in love with in Africa, and that will be a focus of mine always, regardless of what I do on my channel. Let's see. Do you drink wine? I do drink wine, but on rare occasions. I don't drink much at all. My preference is a Weizen. I'm a bit of a beer snob. I don't drink American beer. I think that's carbonated urine. Sorry, I don't drink American beer. I don't drink Castle Lager. I'm sorry, that stuff is horrible, guys. I know a lot of people like it, but the only beer I drink in Africa is Windhoek Lager because it's still brewed by the Reinheitsgebot. Yep, the German purity law. So I'm a bit of a beer snob. My preference is a Weizen. I can't really get that very often in Africa, so I go without it. But I have a personal rule. If I'm going to get behind the wheel, I can't have a drop. If I have one drop of alcohol, no kidding, and I don't violate this rule. It's been my rule for over 30 years, nearly 40 years now. I won't get behind the wheel. And that's because I've driven tanks, and I've driven armored vehicles, and I've driven 5-ton trucks, and I've driven motor vehicles, and I realize that a vehicle is a weapon. Intentionally or not, it is a weapon. Whether you mean for it to be a weapon or not, it is a weapon, and its destruction can be devastating to people. So you have to be responsible. So I don't drink. The only time I usually drink is when I'm traveling in a hotel at night, and I don't have a car, I'm not going anywhere. So I'll have a beer in a bar or something like that, or with dinner. And the same with wine. Although I have wine here. In fact, I have South African wine in my fridge right now. I did a video last month on the South African wine industry and the idiotic ANC restriction on the transport of alcohol, which was killing the wine industry in South Africa. So you can catch that under my Boca list, the South Africa playlist, the Boca list. You can find the video on the South African wine industry. Now, the ban that I was complaining about was lifted since then, a few days after that. I don't think it was in response to my video. I don't think the ANC knows about my videos. And I suspect that they wouldn't pay attention anyway. But that was all about the wine industry. And anyway, so take a look at that video. Check it out. I think you'll find it interesting. And it's pretty cool stuff. So let's see. Yeah, so I do drink wine. South African wine. My preference is German wines and South African wines. But I like Cape Shiraz. Good stuff in South Africa. Really good. Chardonnays are okay, but from my perspective, I mean, people love them. They rave about them. But I like Cape Shiraz. when I went to Cape Town on one of my trips, it was a meeting with a bunch of other U.S. defense officials from Southern Africa, and we went to Cape Town for a conference, and we stayed downtown near the Victoria and Alfred waterfront there. And one of my colleagues was based in Pretoria said, hey, he did the same job in South Africa that I was doing in Botswana. He said, hey, let's go on a wine tour. I'm like, oh, man, a wine tour? He goes, no. I know a guy. Someone here in the embassy knows him. He's got his own combi. We'll just, the two of us will ride around with him. He'll take us to all these great wineries in the wine country. We'll go to Stellenbosch and probably Stellenbosch. Paarl. Okay, Franschhoek. I'm on board. So I'd never done something like that. And I went, oh my God, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Fantastic stuff. Stellenbosch, wine tours, awesome stuff. And all around that whole area there, Constantia, all that, just absolutely amazing. And so when I was there, I really liked this Cape Shiraz. And of course, the idea is you come, you taste a wine, you buy it, it's someplace to give away. But the idea is to get you to buy wine. So it turns out that I didn't know this, these vineyards ship their wine all over the country. So if you want wine, so for instance, you're on vacation, you go down to Western Cape and you find a fantastic Cape Shiraz that you really like, or a Chardonnay. You go, I'd like to get a case of this, and but you don't want to take it back on the plane with you to, you know, to Nelson Mandela Bay or to Durban or Joburg, you know, because you're flying. You can't take the wine, right? They already have the wine in those locations. They have in warehouses, and so you just order it. When you get home, they bring it to you, or you can go pick it up. And so now they don't ship to Botswana, but with diplomatic license plates, because I'm a diplomat at the time, I went down to Pretoria the next time, and my colleague ordered it, so it was at his house. So next time I was in Pretoria, I went by his place, I picked up my case of Cape Shiraz, and then I drove back to Botswana, and of course I'm a diplomat, so no duty, and right into the border with my case of Cape Shiraz. And I enjoyed that. I had a couple bottles left when I left, and I gave it away, but really good stuff. So yeah, wine, yeah, well, I drink wine on occasion, but not very often. All right, so let's see what else, what I missed here. I will only be interested in picking up real bargains because the risk of expropriation. Well, Tony Lynn, I agree with you. That's you got to do some serious research on when it comes to land. But I mean, like in any situation, any crisis, it's an opportunity for some folks. Just you got to be really judicious in your research, and you got to do a really serious cost-benefit analysis to see if it's worthwhile. But anyway, it's definitely something worth checking out. So I'm going to slide Johan's art off of there, okay? And let me get back to this here. That's not what I want. There we go. That's what I want. Put Giselle's promotion banner back up there. So that's, once again, that's promoting Giselle's concert. It was on my channel, the live stream I did from back on May 8th. You can find it under my previous live streams. 1 hour and 3 minutes of music, folk music, country music, and pop music. Excellent, including some brilliant songs. Two of my favorites are Sudwest, about Namibia, and Vir ons Mense, which is about Afrikaans. Yes, Vital is in ons bloed. Yeah, for those who speak Afrikaans, you should enjoy those songs. But check it out. That's Giselle. Let's see what else we got here. Other comments in the chat. Tony Lynn, the state has been charging transfer tax on every single property deal for the past 26 years. If we stole it, why did they change? Well, Tony Lynn, that's because very few property owners in South Africa stole anything. Now, the state stole some land, and some people who currently own land profited or benefited from the fact that the state stole the land, but they're giving a disingenuous argument, of course. And they're violating the spirit and intent of the CODESA, the Convention for Democratic South Africa, in which all parties agreed to a reasonable point in time from which land claims could be made. But they're not making it about that. They're making it about, Jan van Riebeeck in 1652, not about the Bantus 1,300 years before that, or 900 years before that, who came and dispossessed the Khoisan. Anyway, yes, it's disingenuous. It's utter nonsense, folks. Don't lose any sleep over that. Don't pay attention to those. Skalk says, I'll see you on the Morning Shot stream later on. Okay, brilliant, Skalk. I look forward to that. It's always fun to be the guest because you can wait for the questions and you don't have to keep the stream going and bounce around and put stuff in here and put stuff there. Although I enjoy the being the host myself, but I like that when I have a guest on. So those are my Saturday programs that I have a guest on, so you guys should check that out on Saturday. TJ Potguider says, thanks, Chris. We love our country, too. Yeah, well, you should love your country, TJ. Listen, the ANC aside and their governance, their failed governance, and again, I was not a person to criticize the ANC heavily. I want to give them a fair chance, and despite some missteps, I thought they did some things that weren't the right approach for a number of years. But when the massacre at Polokwane occurred, yeah, that's what I call it, the Polokwane massacre, When that happened, and then you had a president of the republic resign because he's no longer the head of a political party, then all bets were off for me. Jacob Zuma came in and he made friends with the Afrikaans speaking community initially by going out and visiting poor Afrikaners and speaking about solidarity with Afrikaners. But that was just window dressing. And then for the whole country as a whole, he just defrauded and stole from everybody. That's what it was all about. And so we had the state capture going on. TJ says Windhoek is great. I agree. Windhoek is fantastic. And as you can see, I'm a Welwitschus fan right here. Not a Tonga fan, but a Welwitschus fan. Huge Welwitschus fan. I have jerseys from the 2015 and the 2019 Rugby World Cup. I have a red road jersey, which is a very coveted, difficult one to get from back in 2015 from England. I got it after the World Cup. And then I have my blue one, which I purchased at the South African-Namibia game at Toyota City, which is what you see in that image right above there. That's Toyota City Stadium in Japan for the Rugby World Cup, the sketch behind me. So I bought my Welwitschus jersey at that game. I actually stood in line for nearly an hour before the game because I saw they were selling them at this big rugby merchandise stand and they weren't available before the World Cup. So I stood there for almost an hour and I watched as the Japanese kept buying Namibia jerseys. And I'm thinking, what do they know about Namibia? They just wanted to wear, so they kept buying them. And I'm like, all of them disappearing. And then I saw just one jersey left and like 3 people ahead of me. And then 2 people went and I'm like, please, please, please don't buy the jersey. Don't buy the jersey. I'll be so disappointed. And then the person went ahead of me, they walked over and they pointed to the jersey. And I'm like, I waited an hour. I'm not going to get this jersey. And they brought it over. It was extra large. And it's a Japanese person, so it was too big. So they gave it back and they put it back in the shelf. I was like, grab that quickly, bring it here. And I got my Welwitschus jersey. It's an awesome thing. It's made by a Japanese company. And anyway, it's great. So yeah, huge fan of Welwitschus and a big supporter of Namibia. But it is a very large country with almost no people in it. So there you have it. All right, so Ice, you're still there. Reinheitsgebot is a must. Windhoek makes the best beer. I'm with you on that one. Windhoek Drought is the best if made in Namibia. Oh, Skulk is still there. Okay, I thought you left. Okay, so Tony Lynn left too. Are people going to work? Or is it time to eat? Or is someone coming on another stream? Anyway, so because people are leaving the scene now. So let me see if I'm going to read some of this stuff to you here about, because it's kind of entertaining. So this is the story about the prophet real quick, folks. Let me read this one to you. So this is from the Nyasa Times, which is a newspaper in Malawi, but telling us about Cameroon. So a prophet who lays his hands on dozens of confirmed and suspected coronavirus sufferers died of the illness on Saturday in Cameroon. So it's been a few days now. Franklin Nidafor, 39, a candidate in Cameroon's presidential election in 2018, claimed he could cure COVID-19. In previous weeks, sufferers had flocked to the Kingship International Ministries Church, founded by Nidafor, where he lay his hands on them and prayed for their healing. This is the Voice of America actually reported this, so not the Nyasa Times. His supporters blocked the entrance to his home in the capital city of Douala for 8 hours as medical staff tried to retrieve his body Saturday morning. Dr. Gail Nunga, who was called to treat Nidafor after he started suffering severe respiratory difficulties a week after falling ill with the virus, said the pastor died 10 minutes after treatment. The governor of the coastal region said a police force had to be deployed when supporters blocked the entrance to his home and claimed the pastor was on a spiritual retreat with God, so he could not be buried. They sang and prayed for his resurrection throughout the weekend. He was buried in front of the house on the day of his death. Listen, folks, my intent here is not to mock people of faith, especially not Christians. There's too many idiots doing that around the world. My point is, in the midst of this virus, this is bizarre that this gentleman was doing this. It's an infectious disease. You can believe in God, but that's strange. Very, very strange. Anyway, so Tony Lynn's taking off too. All right, so people are leaving. What's going on? You got things to do. I think I surprised people with the stream. But hey, thanks for those who tune in. I still got some folks with us now, so I'll stay on for a little bit longer, and then I'll drop off myself. But yeah, so more on that Zambia situation. Let me read that one to you really quickly. So a Chinese restaurant in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, was closed by local authorities after allegedly denying the entry of a local. The accusations came after a Zambian local was said to have been denied entry to the restaurant due to being a foreigner. So is that like sitting on the beach in South Africa? You get arrested for sitting on the beach. Apparently, you can be kicked out of a Chinese restaurant in Zambia for being a foreigner when you're a Zambian. Yeah, Lusaka Mayor Miles Sampa ordered the closure of the establishment. The Lusaka Times reported that even though Sampa did not directly allude to the incident, the mayor said that the Chinese-owned hospitality services are conducting business without proper documentation or in an unethical manner. I think that the unethical manner is that. Now, this is what's disturbing here, and this bothers me, folks, when people get things historically incorrect. And it's not a question of sentiment, it's a question of facts. And this is very important because this perpetuates a myth that's simply untrue. This is what the mayor said. Apartheid finished a long time ago in Lusaka after Zambia gained independence in 1964. Well, there never was apartheid in Zambia. Zambia was Northern Rhodesia, and it never had apartheid as a British colony. Never had apartheid. Now, there was racial discrimination, but apartheid is a very different system, a political system, than simple racial discrimination. Anyway, or political discrimination. So anyway, yeah, that's very disturbing to hear that nonsense. People just throwing up around apartheid as if apartheid is simply something that it was not. I'm not speaking in favor of apartheid. I oppose that system of governance. But my point is that you need to be factually correct. You know, people that weren't alive during the apartheid era may not know better about what apartheid was, and now they think that it was also in Zambia. No, apartheid was only ever in South Africa, and unofficially, many aspects of it was also in Namibia, or Southwest Africa at the time, because it was administered by the South African government. So they applied many of the same things there, although it was never a formal policy in Namibia or Southwest Africa. So this is factually incorrect by the mayor of Lusaka. So shame on you. Clearly you don't know your history, and clearly you have no trouble stoking racial hatred by referring to things that simply do not exist and are untrue. Very frustrating, very frustrating. So the three members of the opposition party in Zimbabwe, three women who were sexually assaulted, abducted, sexually assaulted, urinated on, and put in hospital. And here's pictures of some of them. So here's one of the photographs here of this lady sitting in hospital. My apologies if that's difficult to see. Here's another one. This horrible conduct that takes place in Zimbabwe is just really distressing. Really, really distressing. It bothers me immensely. The fact that the government gets away with this. Oh, here we go. Now, this is a story I forgot to mention. Here we go. Here's a South African story for the South Africans still here. Yeah, he says Zambia must be smoking Azal. And they put saliva on the paper. And when they make that Zal, they share that Zal. God, that's still too funny. Anyway, I haven't taken to Ronaldo's Too Legit stuff. That's pretty good stuff too. I like that one. But so here we have South Africa has now got two more Gripen pilots, two more qualified Gripen pilots. So what we have here is the South African Air Force is getting two more pilots for its Gripen fighters, including the first South African-born Indian Gripen pilot. Ooh, that's so important. Yes, always important to point out the ethnic differences and say who's first, isn't it? He's technically not the first Indian to ever fly a Gripen in South Africa. The other Indian was not born in South Africa. He's the first South African born. So we got to take that distinction. So I suppose one day he'll be the first Indian born in South Africa of Indian parents who've had 5 generations in South Africa, and that will be a historical distinction. Not to throw shade on the gentleman's accomplishment, becoming a pilot, particularly for a fighter aircraft, is pretty impressive and very impressive. But on May 4th, Major Jabulani Jerry Mabona, whose call sign is Cyrax, completed his first solo flight in the Gripen. He was followed the next day by Captain Clyde Ross Naidu, whose call sign is Ronin. Now that's a cool one, right? Ronin? Yeah, I love that. Ronin. That was a great movie, by the way, for those who remember it. The South African Air Force now has a dozen active or reserve pilots for its fleet of 17 single-seat Gripen Type C and its 9 two-seat D jets, although nearly half the fleet is in rotational storage. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was so important for the African National Congress to splurge on a $7.1 billion arms procurement program back in the late 1990s. By the way, that was a $4.54 billion proposed program. They spent $7.1 billion on it. $7.1 billion to buy arms. And included in that was 18 single-seat Gripens. There's only 17 because one of their pilots, who was not proficient, crashed it, by the way. And then 9 of the two-seaters. So that's 26 aircraft. Did I get it right? 9 and 17 is 26. Yeah, 26 of the 27 they're supposed to have. And they have 12 pilots, including reserve pilots, guys who've already retired, who are no longer active, that could be called back. And when you're not serving and flying all the time, that's a problem. Let me just give you an idea why it's so difficult to become a pilot. So training to be a Gripen pilot from recruitment to your first solo flight on the fighter takes about 6.5 years, according to this story, which is true, by the way. This is from Defense Web also. So this includes your basic training, military academy for another year, basic pilot training, which is 1 year long, 180 hours on the Pilatus PC-7, which is a small aircraft. It comes from Switzerland. Awesome aircraft, by the way. 390 hours on the BAE Systems Hawk, and then at 85 combat flight school, and then 70 hours on squadron level mission trainer. It's a flight simulator. And then 30 hours of conversion training, 20 hours of air warfare training, 20 hours of surface warfare training, and then a further 6 sorties before you can fly solo. So it takes an awful lot to become a Gripen pilot, thank goodness. And I suspect that in part is because they had a plane crash because the pilot wasn't really qualified. But yeah, there you go, South Africa. You bought 27 Gripen fighters. You have 26 left, and half of them are in storage because you can't operate them. And you have 12 pilots to fly 27 aircraft. But you had to have these aircraft. So important. But you can't devote the resource to train enough pilots. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the situation. Well, listen, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. It's coming up on the top of the hour. I know a number of folks here, down to a few people left, are probably going to disappear and go watch Ronaldo, as will I. If Ronaldo's not on, somebody let me know real quick. But I think 2 hours is probably enough for the stream today. Thanks for tuning in. We actually had Roman came on the stream this morning. Thanks for coming on, Roman. If you're here, if you've taken off, I'll catch you later on. For those who don't know, I will now be on a couple of streams today. So I had this live stream for my Stray Voltage. I will also be on at 5:30 South Africa time or 11:30 Eastern Standard Time here in the U.S. on Joe Emilio's program, in which I'll be talking about Space Force, the U.S. Space Force. And we'll have a conversation talking about the creation of Space Force, what it's all about, and where it's going, to space. Shouldn't come as a surprise to folks. So that will be at 5:30 today on Joe Emilio's show, The Joe Show, on YouTube. And then also I will be on, now it appears I'll be on Morning Shot for, I guess, unscheduled stream this evening at 8:30 in South Africa time, which would be 2:30 my time here in the U.S. Let's see, I missed a couple comments here real quick. Turn to the left. Ronin is an awesome movie. Ice. It is brilliant. Really good movie. That thing was well done. It's slow in stages, but it's slow in a good way. Anton says, in what part of Pennsylvania do you stay? If I may ask, is it close to Philadelphia? No, you certainly can ask, Anton. So you can look up, it's called Dillsburg, Dillsburg. I am about 23 kilometers from the state capital of Harrisburg, which is located on the Susquehanna, roughly in the center of the state, not quite the center, but it's near the center of the state. So 2 hours from Philadelphia by car, 2 hours from Washington, D.C., going south by car, 3 hours from New York City by car, and then 3 hours, 4 hours from Pittsburgh. So yeah, right in the middle of the state. It's a small town, a few thousand people here, so it's peri-urban. But I'm located in major metropolitan areas. Baltimore is an hour and 45 minutes here. So all the places I might want to go for sporting events or for social things like concerts and music and shows, things like that, are not too far away. So that's all the stuff. Oh yeah, KMH Civil War, absolutely. Gettysburg, which is the most famous battle in the Civil War, is located just 30 kilometers south of my house. I go to Gettysburg frequently. The National Battlefield site I've been to many, many times, probably in my lifetime, because as a child I lived in Maryland and we would go there for school trips. But then as an adult, I would go there too. I would say I've probably been to Gettysburg about 100 plus times, but it's right down the road. So this is very much, in fact, this town, Jeb Stuart's cavalry raided a grocery store and the post office and stole from them. They left IOUs. They never got repaid, of course, because they lost the war. But they took provisions from the country store here in Dillsburg and raided the post office as well in this town of Dillsburg. And then they went back to Gettysburg because Lee needed the cavalry to come back. So they were out scouting and patrolling, and they actually invaded the town that I live in right here, Dillsburg. So yeah, it's a Civil War battle site. This is the northern extent. In fact, the Confederate forces went a little bit further north of here, and they actually got to the Susquehanna River. The lead elements of the cavalry got there, and then one of the brigades from Heath's division, which was one of the ones famously engaged in the battle early. One of the brigades from Heath's divisions actually continued north another 10 or 15 miles and got to Carlisle Barracks, which is where I worked at the Army War College. They burned the barracks and they raided stores there. Actually, I don't think they left the IOUs in that case. They just took provisions, stole them essentially. And then they were recalled back to Gettysburg, and they marched all day to get back to Gettysburg and then rejoin the fight. with Heath's division. I think it was Heath's division. I might be mistaken there. But anyway, yeah, very famous area. So it's 9:54 now, folks. What I'm going to do is thank you so much again for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And I really appreciate you guys being here. So thanks for being part of the stream with me today. And I'll catch you at 5:30 in South Africa on Joe